John had always been an ordinary man. He wasn't a hero or someone with an extraordinary destiny. He was just an engineer, working on a space station above Earth. He had always thought he'd lead a simple life, keeping to his routine, going home to his small apartment every night, and maybe enjoying a quiet weekend now and then. He had never imagined that his life would change so dramatically. It all started during a diplomatic mission. The Intergalactic Peace Council, a group formed by various alien species and human representatives, was holding its first summit on the space station. It was an event that brought together beings from across the galaxy, each with their own cultures and agendas. John wasn't part of the high-level meetings, but he was tasked with maintaining the station's systems, ensuring everything ran smoothly. The day began like any other, but everything changed when he met her. Amara was a sight to behold. She was an alien from a distant planet, tall and graceful, with dark, shimmering skin that seemed to glow under the lights of the station. Her eyes, large and expressive, were the color of the deepest ocean, and her hair cascaded down her back in smooth silver waves. She wasn't just beautiful, though. There was something regal about her, even though she was in a simple outfit compared to the others. There was an air of royalty that surrounded her. John was caught off guard when their paths crossed in the station's main hall. He had seen her before, but only from a distance. This time, they were standing face to face. He was no expert on alien species, but there was something about her presence that felt both mysterious and comforting. As she walked past him, her gaze briefly met his. She didn't look away, and neither did he. For a moment, everything else seemed to fade away. "Excuse me," she said in a soft, melodic voice. "You're the engineer, right?" John nodded, unsure of what to say. He wasn't used to talking to important people, especially not someone like her. "Yes," he replied, still unsure of himself. "I handle the systems here, make sure everything's running properly." "I need a small favor," Amara continued, her eyes still locked on his. "Would you mind showing me around?" "I have some questions about the station." John's mind raced. He had never been asked to give a tour, especially not to someone so important. But before he could refuse or stutter out an excuse, she smiled at him, and the warmth in her expression made him feel at ease. "I'd be happy to," he said almost without thinking. They walked together through the station, with John pointing out different parts of the facility. Amara asked questions, but there was an intensity to her curiosity, as if she wasn't just interested in the station's technology, but in understanding the humans who had built it. As they continued their tour, John couldn't help but notice how effortlessly Amara seemed to fit in, despite being from an entirely different world. Her confidence was striking, and though she seemed calm, there was something underneath it all, an energy, a quiet power that John couldn't ignore. By the end of the tour, John had learned a lot about Amara, but even more about himself. He found himself drawn to her in a way he hadn't expected. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, and yet there was a comfort in her presence. She made him feel like he was more than just an engineer, more than just a cog in the machine. She made him feel like he mattered. "I appreciate the time you've given me," Amara said as they stood near the observation window, looking out at the stars. "You've been kind to me, John. Most humans only see me as royalty or a diplomat, but you've treated me like a person. For that, I thank you." John smiled, though he wasn't sure what to say. "It was my pleasure." The silence between them was comfortable, but it didn't last long. "I'm leaving the station soon," Amara said suddenly, her voice quiet but serious. "There's a matter of great importance that I must attend to. It involves my people." She paused, as if considering whether to say more. "I want you to know that your kindness hasn't gone unnoticed." John didn't understand what she meant at first, but he didn't press her for details. Amara seemed to be the kind of person who had a lot of responsibility on her shoulders, and John didn't want to pry. "I hope everything works out," John said, his voice sincere. "If there's anything I can do, just let me know." Amara looked at him, her eyes softening. "You'll be hearing from me soon, John." There's much more to this universe than what we can see. And sometimes, the most unexpected paths lead to the most extraordinary destinations. John wasn't sure what she meant by that, but he nodded, still captivated by her words. Before they parted ways, Amara reached out and gently touched his arm. I hope we meet again, John. Perhaps sooner than you think. With that, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of diplomats. John stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of what had just happened. His heart was racing, and his mind was filled with questions. Who was Amara, really? What did she mean by soon? And why did he feel like he had just experienced something life-changing? The next few days were a blur. John went about his work as usual, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Amara, her image, her words, her presence. It all lingered in his mind. He had met a lot of people on the space station, but no one had made him feel the way she had. No one had ever seen him like she had. And that was what made all the difference. It was on the evening of the last day before Amara was set to leave the station that he received a message. It wasn't from his usual contacts. It was from her. I'm leaving tomorrow, the message began, but I need you to meet me in the docking bay at 2200 hours. I have something important to discuss with you. John's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know what this was about, but the urgency in her message made him feel like he couldn't ignore it. At the specified time, he arrived at the docking bay, his mind racing with possibilities. Was she leaving for good? Was there something wrong? What did she need to tell him? As he stepped into the bay, he saw Amara standing near one of the docking ships, waiting for him. She was dressed in a flowing royal gown, her expression calm but serious. I'm glad you came, she said, her voice steady. There's something I need to tell you, something you won't hear from anyone else. John's heart raced as he approached her. What's going on, Amara? She turned to face him, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made him feel as if the entire universe was watching them. John, she said, her voice filled with a quiet strength. I'm not just an ambassador, and I'm not just a diplomat. I'm a queen. And this marriage, it's not just a union between two people. It's a political alliance, one that could change the course of history. John blinked, completely caught off guard. Queen? What did she mean? Amara seemed to sense his confusion. You're not just marrying me out of love, John. You're marrying me because the fate of my people depends on it, and I need you to understand the gravity of what we're about to face. John was still trying to process her words. He had never expected any of this. He had thought their connection was just that, a simple, unexpected connection. But now he realized there was much more at stake. I didn't know, John said, his voice low. I didn't know any of this. Amara nodded, her gaze softening. I didn't want to burden you with this until it was absolutely necessary, but now it's time for you to understand what's ahead of us. This isn't just a marriage, it's a journey, one that will test us both in ways we can't yet imagine. And with that, John knew that his life would never be the same again. John stood there, his mind racing as Amara's words sank in. He had never expected anything like this. A queen? His mind spun as he tried to wrap his head around the implications of what she had just told him. Everything he thought he knew about their relationship, about the reasons they had connected, seemed to have changed in an instant. For a long moment, there was only silence between them. John's heart pounded in his chest, and his mouth felt dry. He had never been one to shy away from a challenge, but this was something entirely different. He wasn't just marrying an alien princess. He was marrying someone who was going to change the course of an entire planet's history. Amara was the first to break the silence. She took a step closer to him, her eyes softening as she reached out and placed a hand on his arm. I know this is a lot to take in, she said quietly, her voice filled with warmth. But I need you to understand the gravity of what's happening. My people, my planet, they're in danger. This marriage, this alliance, it's the only way to secure peace." John swallowed hard. "But I don't understand." "Why me? Why did it have to be me?" Amara hesitated for a moment, her gaze distant, as if she were searching for the right words. "It wasn't just a choice, John. It's destiny. The prophecy of my people foretold that I would marry a being from another world. A human, to be specific. It's a bond that will unite our species, one that will strengthen the alliance between Earth and my planet." John felt a chill run down his spine. A prophecy? This wasn't just about love. It was about something much bigger than either of them. "I didn't know," John said again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know what I was walking into." Amara's expression softened, and she stepped closer to him. "I didn't want to burden you with this information at first. I wanted us to have something real, something free from the politics and expectations of my people. But now, it's unavoidable. This isn't just about us, John. It's about the survival of my people." John took a deep breath, trying to steady his thoughts. "So, what happens now? What do we do?" Amara looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "Now we face the truth. My enemies know of our marriage, and they see it as a weakness. They'll stop at nothing to tear us apart. The rival factions on my planet have been planning to overthrow my family for years, and they see this alliance with Earth as a threat to their power. I don't know how much time we have." The weight of her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. John felt his chest tighten as he tried to process the situation. This was more than he had bargained for. But even so, he couldn't back down now. He had made a promise to Amara, and he wasn't about to abandon her. "I'm not going anywhere," John said firmly, his voice steady. "I'm with you, Amara. Whatever it takes, I'll stand by your side." Amara's expression softened even more, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "I knew I could count on you." They stood there for a moment, a quiet understanding passing between them. The enormity of what they were about to face was undeniable. But in that moment, John knew he had made the right choice. He wasn't just marrying an alien queen. He was standing up for her people, and for their future together. The next few days were a whirlwind. John found himself caught up in the chaos of preparing for a life he hadn't planned for, one that was full of responsibility and danger. He wasn't just an engineer anymore. He was part of something much larger, something that could change the fate of two worlds. Amara had given him a glimpse into the world she came from, a world where power and politics played an even larger role than he could have ever imagined. She had explained the intricacies of her people's royal court, their ancient traditions, and the deep-rooted conflicts that had been simmering for generations. It was a world that John had no experience in, a world where every decision carried weight, where every word spoken could shift the balance of power. But even as he struggled to understand it all, he couldn't deny the connection he felt to Amara. Despite the political intrigue and the dangers they faced, their bond had grown stronger. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew that he wanted to face it with her. One evening, after a long day of meetings and planning, Amara invited John to join her for a quiet dinner in her quarters. They sat together in a room that overlooked the stars, the soft glow of the station's lights casting shadows on the walls. It was a peaceful moment, a brief respite from the chaos that surrounded them. "Tell me more about your world, John," Amara said as they ate. "What is Earth like? What do you love most about it?" John smiled at the question, grateful for the chance to focus on something other than politics and royal duties. "Earth's beautiful in its own way," he said, his eyes distant as he thought about his home. "There's something special about the way nature and civilization coexist. I love the forests, the oceans, And the people, well, they can be complicated, but they're resilient. We've been through a lot, but we always find a way to keep going. Amara listened intently, her eyes never leaving his as he spoke. It sounds wonderful, she said softly. I've always dreamed of seeing Earth, but I never imagined it would be like this. I never imagined I'd be here with you. John chuckled. I didn't exactly plan for this either. Amara smiled, a soft, genuine smile that made John's heart flutter. I'm glad it's you, John. I don't think I could do this without you. As the conversation drifted into silence, John found himself looking at her. Truly looking at her. For the first time, Amara wasn't just a queen. She was a woman, just like anyone else, with hopes and fears, dreams and doubts. She had been thrust into a position of unimaginable responsibility, a responsibility that was larger than life itself. And yet in this quiet moment, she felt like someone who could be understood, someone who wasn't alone. John reached out and took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. We'll get through this together. Amara's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, the weight of the world seemed to lift. She leaned in, resting her head on his shoulder. I hope you're right. They stayed like that for a while, the silence between them comfortable, filled with the unspoken bond that had grown between them over the past few days. John didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He was ready to face it. He was ready to stand by Amara, no matter what. The next morning, everything changed. John received an urgent message from Amara's royal advisor, informing him that the rebel factions on her planet had made their move. The palace was under siege, and Amara's family was in danger. John's heart sank as he read the message. It was happening faster than they had anticipated. Within hours, John found himself aboard a shuttle with Amara, heading toward her home planet. They were going to face this together. They didn't have a plan, but they had each other, and that was all they needed. As they approached the planet, the sight of it, lush and green, with towering cities and vast oceans, took his breath away. It was beautiful, just as Amara had described, but the beauty was overshadowed by the storm of uncertainty that loomed ahead. They were about to enter a world that was far more dangerous than either of them had imagined. But they would face it together. They would fight for their future. And no matter the cost, they wouldn't back down. John could feel the tension building inside him as the shuttle descended toward Amara's home planet. The vast oceans and green landscapes outside the window were beautiful, but they couldn't mask the urgency of the situation. The rebellion had already begun, and Amara's people were in danger. As the shuttle approached the royal palace, John's mind raced. He had no idea what to expect once they landed. He was just a regular man, an engineer, nothing more. And yet, here he was, thrust into the heart of a political crisis that could change the future of an entire world. The weight of his responsibility felt heavier with each passing second. Amara sat beside him, her expression unreadable as she stared out the window. She was quiet, lost in her thoughts, but John could sense the turmoil within her. This was her home. These were her people. She had to be terrified, even if she didn't show it. We'll get through this, John said softly, trying to offer some comfort. He wasn't sure if she heard him. She didn't respond, but he saw her fingers tighten around the armrest. The shuttle touched down with a gentle thud, and the door opened to reveal the royal landing pad. A small contingent of Amara's guards stood waiting for them, their expressions serious as they greeted their queen. Amara stood up first, her posture regal and strong despite the situation. She turned to John, giving him a small but determined smile. Are you ready? She asked, her voice calm, but there was a hint of worry behind her words. John nodded, his heart racing. I'm with you, Amara. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Together, they walked down the ramp toward the waiting guards. The palace loomed in the distance, its towering spires rising above the trees. It was a beautiful sight, but it was also a reminder. of the weight of Amara's responsibilities. The palace was not just a home, it was a symbol of power, and right now, that power was under threat. Amara's guards led them through the grand halls of the palace, past marble columns and intricate tapestries that told the history of her people. The air was thick with tension, and John couldn't help but feel out of place. The palace was unlike anything he had ever seen. There was an ancient beauty to it, but it felt cold, impersonal. It was a place built for royalty, not for someone like him. As they reached the royal council chamber, the doors opened to reveal a group of Amara's advisors gathered around a large table. Their faces were grim, their voices hushed as they spoke in low tones. The moment Amara entered, however, all conversation stopped. Everyone stood, bowing in respect to their queen. Amara didn't waste any time. "What's the situation?" she asked, her voice steady, but John could hear the undercurrent of fear in her words. One of her advisors, a tall man with silver hair and a stern expression, stepped forward. "The rebels have seized the outer territories, Your Majesty. They are advancing toward the capital. We've already lost contact with several key regions. We believe they're planning a full assault on the palace within the next few hours." John could see the worry in Amara's eyes, but she didn't let it show on her face. "What's our plan?" she asked, her voice firm. The advisor hesitated before speaking again. "We need to fortify the palace and prepare for a possible siege. However, the rebel forces are well organized and heavily armed. We may need to evacuate, but the safest route is already compromised." John could see Amara's thoughts racing as she processed the information. "What about the royal fleet?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "We can't let them get any closer." "My people won't survive a siege. They're still loyal, Your Majesty," the advisor replied. "But they're stationed in different parts of the system, and it will take time to mobilize them. We may not have enough time." Amara turned to John, her gaze intense. "We need a way to buy time," she said quietly. "I know you're not a soldier, John, but do you have any ideas?" John wasn't sure what to say. He was just an engineer, not a military strategist, but he knew how to think on his feet. He had to do something, anything, to help her. "I can try to get some of the station's defense systems operational," he said, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Maybe we can set up some automated defenses to slow them down. It won't be much, but it might give us enough time to organize." Amara's eyes softened as she looked at him, gratitude flickering in her gaze. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect my people, but I can't do this alone." John nodded, determined. "You won't have to. I'm with you, Amara." The hours that followed were a blur of frantic activity. John worked alongside Amara's technicians, trying to repair and fortify the palace's defenses. It wasn't easy. Most of the technology was old and outdated, and the time constraints made it all the more difficult. But John was resourceful, and he refused to let them down. As night fell, the palace was on high alert. The sound of distant explosions could be heard, and the sky was lit with flashes of light from the ongoing battles taking place outside the palace walls. The rebels were closing in. Amara and John sat together in a small, private room, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the nearby monitors. It had been a long day, and both of them were exhausted, but neither of them had any intention of resting. They still had work to do. "We're running out of time," Amara said quietly, her voice filled with concern. "The rebel forces are getting closer, and we don't have the resources to hold them off for long." John looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of the situation. He had never imagined his life would take this turn, but now that he was here, he wasn't going to back down. He was committed to her people, to their future together. "We'll find a way," he said, trying to reassure her, though he wasn't entirely sure how. "We'll make it through this." Amara turned to him, her gaze intense. "I don't want to lose you," she said softly.
"I can't lose you, John. John reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently.
"You won't lose me," he said, his voice firm. "I'm not going anywhere." For a moment, they just sat there, holding each other's gaze. The world outside was crumbling, and the fate of an entire planet hung in the balance. But in that moment, they found comfort in each other, a quiet strength that gave them both the courage to keep fighting. The palace's alarm suddenly blared, snapping them both out of their quiet reverie. A voice echoed over the intercom, urgent and filled with panic. "The rebels are at the gates! They're here!" Amara stood up, her face hardening with resolve. "It's time," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. "We fight or we fall." John nodded, standing alongside her. They weren't just facing an enemy. They were fighting for a future. For their future. And whatever it took, they would stand together. The palace was in chaos. Outside, the sounds of distant gunfire and explosions echoed through the night. The rebel forces were closing in, and every passing minute seemed to bring them closer to the heart of the palace. Inside, Amara and John stood shoulder to shoulder, surrounded by her most trusted guards and advisors. Everyone was ready, but no one could deny the overwhelming sense of fear that lingered in the air. John felt it too. He wasn't used to this kind of pressure, but he had come to realize something important in the last few days. This wasn't just about defending a palace or a throne. It was about protecting the people Amara loved and the future they hoped to build together. No matter how unprepared he felt, he had made a promise to her, and he intended to keep it. Amara stood at the center of the room, calm and composed despite the mounting tension. Her regal demeanor remained intact, but John could see the strain in her eyes. This wasn't how she had imagined her first days as queen. She had hoped for peace, for a future where her people could thrive. Instead, she was faced with the destruction of everything she had worked for. "We don't have much time," one of the advisors said, his voice tight with urgency. "The rebels are almost at the gates. We need to make a decision." Amara nodded, her gaze never wavering. "We'll hold them off for as long as we can," she said, her voice steady. "The palace defenses are in place, but we need to ensure that the evacuation routes are secure. If it comes to that, we need to get the people to safety." John could see that she was trying to stay in control, but he also knew how hard this was for her. She was a queen, but she was also a person. Someone who had dreams, who had hoped for a life of peace and stability. Now, everything she had worked for was at risk, and the weight of that responsibility was crushing. He stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "I'll help with the defenses," he said. "I know the station's systems. I can help set up automated weapons, drones, anything that can slow them down." Amara turned to him, her eyes softening. "You don't have to do this, John. I don't want you to be in danger." "I'm already in danger," John replied with a small smile. "We all are, but I'm not leaving you. I'm with you, Amara." She didn't say anything at first, just looked at him, her gaze filled with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Thank you." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of activity. John worked alongside Amara's technicians to fortify the palace's defenses. The situation outside was worsening, and every new report they received made it clear that the rebels were relentless. They were prepared to take the palace, and they weren't going to stop until they had control. John had never felt so out of his depth, but as he worked, he found himself focusing on the task at hand. The sound of gunfire grew louder, and the tension in the air became almost unbearable. But he kept his mind sharp. Every system he helped repair, every piece of technology he activated, gave him a small sense of control. In the face of such uncertainty, it was all he could do. Amara, too, was working tirelessly. She moved from room to room, overseeing the preparations, giving orders, and speaking to her people. She didn't allow herself to show weakness, even though John could see it in her eyes. She was fighting not just for her throne, but for everything she had ever known. She was fighting for her people, for a future that had suddenly become uncertain.
John, Amara called, pulling him from his thoughts.
He turned to see her standing in the doorway, her expression serious. "There's something you need to know." He walked over to her, concern flooding his chest. "What is it? The rebels have breached the outer walls," she said, her voice low. "We don't have much time left. They're coming for us." John's heart skipped a beat. The reality of the situation hit him like a wave. This wasn't just a political dispute anymore. This was war, and they were at the center of it. "Is there anything else we can do?" he asked, his mind racing. Amara's eyes softened, but her voice remained firm. "We have one final option. There's a secret escape route beneath the palace. One that leads to the outer rim of the planet. It's not ideal, but it's our only chance if we need to evacuate. If we can't hold them off, that's where we'll go." John nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I'll make sure the route is secure," he said. "But we're not giving up yet." Amara smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes.
"You're brave, John."
"I don't deserve your loyalty." "Yes, you do," he replied, his voice unwavering. "You're fighting for something bigger than yourself, Amara, and I'll fight with you." The hours that followed were filled with tense anticipation. The palace was now fully on alert. Guards patrolled the halls, and the sounds of distant explosions continued to echo through the air. Amara and John continued to work, making final preparations, ensuring that the defenses were ready, and hoping against hope that they could buy enough time for the reinforcements to arrive. But as the hours passed, it became clear that they weren't going to make it. The rebel forces were too strong, too organized. The palace's defenses were holding for now, but for how long? Amara stood at the window, looking out over the palace grounds. John approached her, standing beside her in silence. Together they watched as the rebel forces advanced, their movements coordinated and relentless. The palace was surrounded, and there was nowhere left to run. "We've done everything we could," John said quietly, his voice heavy with the weight of the situation.
"Well?"
"We fought as hard as we could." Amara didn't respond at first. She just stood there, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. But then, slowly, she turned to him. "I never wanted this for my people," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I never wanted to see them suffer. But now it's all coming apart." "I failed them." John shook his head, stepping closer to her. "You didn't fail anyone. You're doing everything you can to protect them. You're not giving up." Amara met his eyes, her expression filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "I have to fight for them. No matter what happens, I can't let them fall into chaos." John took her hand, holding it tightly. "We'll fight together, Amara. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." As the sound of the rebel forces grew louder, Amara took a deep breath and nodded. She turned to face the council, her gaze hardening with resolve. "We will not surrender. We will defend this palace with everything we have. And we will fight until the very end." The room filled with a renewed sense of purpose. John could see the fire in her eyes, the determination that had made her the leader she was. She wasn't just a queen. She was a warrior, a protector, and no matter the odds, she would never stop fighting for her people. And neither would he.